One day, when Fumi came home early from work, he was surprised to find that his wife wasn't in their room. He quickly asked Vilai, who was on the back porch, where she was. Vilai pointed him toward Kyo's room. Fumi, now curious and a little uneasy, stormed over and knocked loudly on the door. Sure enough, when he opened it, there was his wife inside. Fumi was furious. He started yelling and caused a scene, dragging both Sivan and Kyo into the living room for what seemed like an interrogation. He fired off question after question, like he was cross-examining them both. It didn't take long for Kyo to crack under the pressure. He admitted that for the past month, he'd been in a relationship with Sivana's mother because he was struggling to pay his rent. Hey there, welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into another shocking real-life story. This one comes straight from Phon Savan City, Laos, and trust me, it's a wild one. It's all about a mother who rents out rooms in her house. But things take a crazy turn when she gets involved with not one, but two young men staying there. What's going on in this story? Let's break it down and take a closer look. Before we get into the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and share this with your friends. The more, the better. Now, let's get into it. The story starts with a woman named Sivan, born in 1969, from Ban Kangthat, Laos. Back in the day, she worked as a teacher and was known for being outgoing and always speaking her mind. In 1996, she married Fumi, a government employee working in the land and forestry sector. Fumi was 3 years older than her. After only 8 months of marriage, Fumi got transferred to Phon Savan City for work, which meant Sivan had to leave her job and follow him. They had saved up quite a bit of money, so they bought a luxurious house, moving out of the official housing Fumi had been provided. But things weren't so easy when it came to having a child. Year after year, they struggled with fertility issues. Several rounds of IVF didn't work, and adopting a child wasn't as easy as they had hoped. They finally managed to adopt a child in 2007, but when the boy was 6 years old, his biological parents came back to reclaim him. It was a tough situation, but Sivan and Fumi understood the deep bond between the child and his real parents, so they let him go. Once again, they were back to living alone in their big house. With Fumi off and out of town for work, Sivan kept herself busy. She started practicing yoga, doing aerobics, and even joined a group of moms who were into cooking and staying fit. With the wealth they had built over the years, they also invested in several rental properties across Phon Savan. Sivan spent her days staying active and managing the rental income. When Fumi suggested hiring a maid to keep her company while he was away, Sivan politely refused. She liked being independent, only occasionally inviting her nephew over if she needed some company. Then, around mid-2018, Fumi came up with a plan to rent out 3 rooms at the back of the house, near the kitchen. This way, the house wouldn't feel so empty, and they could bring in a little extra income. Sivan thought it was a great idea and posted ads on Facebook and her fence about the rooms for rent. From that point on, they had 3 boarders. The first was Kyo, a 25-year-old guy who worked as a singer in a nightclub. He was from Bandung and was super friendly, always smiling. The second was Vilai, a 27-year-old woman from Ban Hua who worked at a car dealership. She wasn't home much. She'd leave early in the morning and return after 10 p.m. The third was Kamfiang, a 26-year-old quiet guy from Solavan City. He worked as a finance admin at a Chinese food restaurant and was a bit of a nerd. Despite their different schedules, they all became friends with Sivan and Fumi. And even though most of them were out during the day, at least the house didn't feel so lonely at night. So, here's the situation. The 3 boarders at Fumi and Sivana's house seemed like they were doing pretty well. They all had decent jobs that should have been enough to get by in the city. But everything took a turn in early to mid-2020 when the pandemic hit. The economy took a huge hit, and businesses, including the ones that Kyo and Kamfiang worked at, were really struggling. Nightclubs and restaurants were especially hard hit due to the lockdowns, limited hours, and a drop in customers. Kyo and Kamfiang were still working, but it wasn't nearly as often, and they both saw their paychecks shrink or even get delayed. Vilai, on the other hand, wasn't hit as hard because her work at the car dealership kept running, even though she too had some friends whose wages were affected. But things were tough for Keo. The club he worked at was only open once a week and only for a few hours, meaning his income dropped dramatically. He approached Sivan and asked for some time to pay his rent, promising to pay it as soon as he could. At first, Sivan was annoyed and turned him down, but seeing how hard things were for him, she couldn't bring herself to kick him out. She did give him a little extra time, even though Kamfying was also behind on his rent. But after a couple of months, the patience started running out. Keo hadn't paid his rent in 4 months, and by August 15, 2020, Sivan had had enough. She told him to pack his bags and leave. However, Keo was desperate. He begged her, crying, saying he had nowhere else to go. So when her husband Fumi was out of the house, Sivan told Keo that he could make up for the rent in other ways. Keo agreed, and this arrangement went on for a while. Things took a major turn on the afternoon of Friday, September 11, 2020. Fumi came home unexpectedly from work and couldn't find his wife in the room. He was curious and asked Vilai, who was hanging out on the back porch, where Sivan was. Vilai pointed him to Keo's room. Fumi immediately knocked hard on the door, and sure enough, he found his wife inside. He was livid. Fumi went into full-on rage mode and pulled Sivan and Keo into the living room for what felt like an interrogation. It was there that Keo finally admitted to having a relationship with Sivan for about a month, all because he couldn't pay the rent. At that moment, Fumi was done. He told Keo to leave the house immediately or he'd call the police. Keo had no choice but to pack up and leave. No one knows exactly what happened to him after that, but Fumi made it clear he wasn't tolerating any more of this behavior. As for Sivan, she was full of apologies, and Fumi, despite his anger, still forgave her. A few weeks later, Fumi had to go out of town for work, so he asked his widowed niece, Sithi, to stay with Sivan for a while and keep her company. Sithi agreed and brought her 4-year-old son to stay for a few days. Fumi, feeling bad that Sivan had been alone, hoped that having Sithi around would keep things peaceful at home. But to be honest, he was still worried about Kamfying, his remaining boarder, and whether he might cause more trouble for Sivan. He just hoped that after what had happened with Keo, Sivan had learned her lesson. By Saturday, September 26, 2020, things had already hit a breaking point. That night, around 10 p.m., Sivan saw Vilai leaving her room with a man. This set her off because she didn't like the idea of Vilai bringing a guy into the house, especially her own rental space. But instead of backing down, Vilai fired back, laughing. "Oh please, you're so high and mighty. I know what you did with Kamfying. Keo's gone, and now Kamfying's been devoured, too." This made Sivan furious. Without thinking, she grabbed Vilai by the hair and started pulling. Sithi, who was there witnessing the whole scene, stepped in right away to break it up. Sivan told Vilai to clean up her things and leave. Vilai, however, wasn't scared. She packed up quickly, but before she walked out the door, she shot back. "Be careful. I've got footage of you knocking on Kamfying's door and going inside his room. We'll see how this plays out," and she stormed off with her boyfriend. It turned out Vilai wasn't bluffing. She had recorded everything and had even gotten Mr. Fumi's WhatsApp number. On October 4, 2020, she sent him the video. As you can imagine, Fumi was livid when he saw it. He couldn't believe what his wife had done. All these years, he had worked hard to provide for them, yet his wife had been betraying him at home. He had given her everything, and she had crossed a line he couldn't ignore. They might not have had kids, but that didn't mean they could throw their morals out the window. Fumi's anger exploded, and he confronted Sivan. He even kicked Kamfying out of their home. The young man only apologized, explaining that everything that had happened was because Sivan had coerced him into it, to make up for his unpaid rent. 2 weeks later, Fumi's trust in Sivan was completely shattered. He couldn't shake the feeling that she had been unfaithful. Every time she went off for yoga, Zumba, or anything else, his suspicions grew. Eventually, after 23 years together, Fumi made the heartbreaking decision to separate. He couldn't live with the constant doubt. Sivan, tearful and pleading, couldn't convince him to give her another chance. And even though there was a nephew staying with them, Fumi couldn't shake the thought that Sivan might still find ways to sneak around. It was just too much for him to handle. By Friday, October 29, 2020, Sivana's anger had reached a boiling point. She went to the place where Valai worked, hoping to confront her. When she got there, it was lunchtime, and the security guard told her that Valai had stepped out for a meal. Sivan waited for about 30 minutes, but Valai still didn't show up. Just as she was about to leave, she noticed a small alley next to the building and decided to check it out. To her surprise, she saw the back door open and Valai inside, alone, touching up her makeup. The moment Valai spotted her former landlady, she was shocked. She quickly tried to close the door, but Sivan rushed in, pulling a knife from her bag. She lunged at Valai, who screamed loudly in panic. A few employees nearby heard the commotion and rushed in to break up the fight. Valai was quickly taken to the hospital, suffering from several injuries to her back, but thankfully, she survived. Sivan, on the other hand, was arrested and taken to the local police station. When questioned, Sivan explained that she had a grudge against Valai, who she blamed for pushing her husband to ask for a divorce. She accused Valai of being trouble, coming home late, sneaking over the fence, making noise all night, and even drinking excessively. Sivan claimed she had wanted to kick her out for a long time but had been too soft-hearted. Valai, however, had a different story. She denied everything Sivan said, calling it all lies. According to her, Sivana's accusations were just a way to cover up her own actions. Valai had proof that Sivan had been involved with 2 of the boarders, including camping. Valai argued that the landlady was only trying to shift the blame because her husband had caught her and was threatening divorce. At the time of the incident, Fumi was already in the process of contacting a lawyer to start the divorce proceedings. This violent outburst from Sivan only confirmed to him that his decision was the right one. He couldn't believe how much his wife had changed. The woman he once knew as gentle and loving had become someone unrecognizable, rude, unreasonable, and acting out of character. He confronted her, telling her not to blame Valai. "Look at yourself," he said. "Had Valai not reported you, would you have continued with these despicable acts?" Sivan had no response. She stood there, speechless. After the incident, Sivan, through her lawyer, tried to make amends. She reached out to both Valai and Fumi, hoping to settle things privately. Her lawyer offered to cover Valai's medical expenses and other damages in exchange for Valai withdrawing her police report. However, Fumi wasn't having it. He made it clear that he wasn't going to let Valai back down and insisted the law take its course. He felt that what Sivan had done was enough to damage the family's reputation, and he wasn't going to let it go just to protect her. Despite pressure from her family, who was furious with Fumi, he stuck to his guns and pushed forward with the case. He was determined to let justice run its course. During the trial, the prosecution called on Kyo and Kamfiang as additional witnesses. But neither of them showed up. They were likely too embarrassed to get involved. By the time the trial wrapped up on March 15, 2021, the judge found Sivan guilty of second-degree attempted murder and assault with a knife. The sentence: 7 years in prison. Not long after, Fumi and Sivan were officially separated. He made sure her family got 2 of the rental houses they owned in Fonsaven suburbs as part of the settlement. Some people suggested Fumi take legal action against Sivan for misconduct, but he decided against it. He felt that the sentence was punishment enough and hoped it would serve as a lesson to her. It was a sad end to what had been a long marriage, but for Fumi, it was the only way forward. What lessons can we take from this story?